Hello, my name's Lucy.
And my name's Eleanor, and we're both research assistants, and we work at the University of Oxford on the Myriad Research Project.
As research assistants, our role is really varied, so we do things such as data collection.
Yep, we also have to enter all of that data, which is a lot because we have a lot of participants in our project.
We also liaise with participants, so in our case that's the schools that are enrolled in our study, so speaking with teachers and speaking with pupils when we're visiting the schools.
Yeah, we also go into schools to do something called public engagement. That's where we go in and we talk about what is it like to be a researcher and also the current research going on at the moment.
We also help to write up the papers that come out of our study, so writing up our findings and spreading them out there.
Yeah, it's a really varied role, and it will also vary depending on what type of research project you work on.
Yeah, and it's a really good stepping stone for a career in research if that's what you're interested in.
So today, Lucy and I are going to talk to you about designing and carrying out your own research project.
So through the series of clips that you've now watched, you'll have a really good understanding of how research methods apply to a real-life research project. And you're now going to have the chance to create your own research project. Your teacher will be able to tell you what's possible in your school, but we also have some ideas of how you can do this.
Yeah, so your teacher should have a data set, and they'll be able to provide that to you if you'd like. That data was collected on something called the Young Researcher Challenge. Now this was part of our own research. We wanted to ask young people, what should we be asking in our questionnaires that we're not already asking? So what do young people feel is really important for us to be researching? So we asked them to come up with some questions for us to go in those questionnaires, and we got about 700 responses. We then went through every single one and we looked for which questions, which topics are most commonly coming up. And then from those common topics, we then selected the most well-structured questions and we put them back to the young people again. And we said, can you vote on these and choose the final questions that you want to see in our questionnaires?
After everyone had voted, we took the 15 most popular of those questions and we added them to the end of our questionnaires. So these were answered by the pupils taking part in the Myriad project.
You can see these 15 questions in your student workbook.
A type of analysis that you could do on this data would be a secondary data analysis. So that's where you analyse data that's been provided to you rather than collecting any data yourself.
Think carefully about what is possible to answer using this data. So I'd suggest having a look at those 15 questions and also have a look at the other variables we provided in the data set. And just think, what could you find out from this data? So you might think, I wondered, how does feelings of loneliness correlate with how similar people feel their interests are to others their age? So you could run something called correlation analysis, where you're looking at just how well do these two variables correlate. This would be an example of a quantitative analysis because you're using numerical data only.
Alternatively, you could carry out a qualitative data analysis. So you might want to look at what do young people feel is the biggest cause of stress in their lives. To do this, you would go through all of the written responses to the questionnaire and you would code and categorise them and then write up your findings. If you are going to do a qualitative analysis, then it would be easier to use a subset of the data. So that's a smaller section of the data and that just cuts down the amount of hours that you'll need to spend coding.
Absolutely. When you are analysing your data, you need to then come up with a conclusion of what you think you found. Be really careful when you're doing this because just because you find, for example, a correlation does not equal causation. It may be really exciting to find a particular result, but you do need to think carefully about what it actually means.
So, for example, a researcher might find that higher sun cream use correlates with higher ice cream sales. Now, that doesn't mean that using sun cream causes people to buy ice cream or vice versa. There's a third variable here, which would be the amount of sunshine on the day. So make sure when you're interpreting your results that you use logic and reason and your own knowledge to explain your findings before jumping to any conclusions.
Yeah, definitely. Now you might want to carry out your own data collection. There's various ways that you could do this. A simple option could just be to simply take those 15 questions and ask them to pupils in your school. You could then compare the data that you've collected to the data from the Young Researcher Challenge. That data was collected from all over the UK. So that will allow you to answer questions such as, How does my local area or my school compare to the national average? If you do find a difference, just try and work out and reason, why is there a difference? What might that be?
If you wanted to go one step further, you could use your own knowledge, you could look at previous research findings, and you could use the questions from the Young Researcher Challenge as an example, and you could create your own research project from scratch. If you do this, just make sure you've watched our Ethics in Research film first, and make sure that your teacher has checked your project for ethical approval before you collect any data.
Yep, absolutely. Now the final step is to try and get your findings out there. There's various ways that you could do this. You could talk to your school and write an article for the school newspaper, or you could look at the different young people's journals out there and you could write a piece for their journal. Do be careful though, because different journals have different requirements. So just make sure that you check the journal's requirements before you submit your work to them. We really hope that you enjoy designing and carrying out your own research project.